Hello, this is the narration that goes with the child abuse video, child abuse PowerPoint rather. So let me share my screen and get started. You know, this is a terrible topic. No one likes to talk about it, but it's important that we do, because you will have children in your classroom almost every year who need some kind of a report. Either they are neglected or you're suspecting some kind of abuse, but you're a mandated reporter, so you need to know. It happened in my room almost every year. And sometimes you're just so amazed. Like for instance, one time, I had to line my kids up to take them to the bathroom because we only had one bathroom on our hallway, so we all had an assigned time. So the girls were in the girls' bathroom, the boys are in the boys' bathroom, and then when they're done, they come and they just sit crisscross applesauce by the lockers while we wait for everyone to be finished. So I had two little guys in my first grade class who'd been pals for since they were in pre-K, best buddies. And I could hear them in the bathroom kind of mumbling to each other. And so they come out of the bathroom and one of them says to me, well, actually, he said to the other little boy, "You should show her. You should show her." And the other little boy's shaking his head. And he says it again. Well, at that point, let me tell you, as a first grade teacher, I was really suspicious because I thought he had something really delightful in his pocket, like a little pocket knife or something like that little boys are apt to pick up that belong to their older brothers and they want to show off on the playground, that kind of stuff. I can't tell you how many of those I confiscated. And I was getting ready to go over there and say, "Okay, Junior, you need to turn your pockets inside out." That's what I always ask him to do. Turn your pockets inside out. Let me see what's in there. Anyway, so before I could do that, the other little boy says, "Oh, Ms. E, you really need to come over here and look at this." And the other little boy, and before anyone could stop him, he did one of these and pulled his shirt up. Well, across his back, there were all these welt marks because he had been beaten with a cord. I mean, they were large. And I was, trying to act very nonchalant and go, "Oh, thank you," put a shirt down. And had them all sit down and, try to pretend nothing's happening. Of course, the other kids are all standing there with their mouth hanging open and, whispering to each other. Anyway, sent them all back in the room, gave them something to do that kept them busy, and called the other little boy back out in the hallway that had been injured and said, and I just asked him one question: "Who did that?" And he told me it was his mom, which also happened to be my homeroom mom. She's very involved, very busy, very friendly. As you can see, it can happen in any family. And so I brought him back in and, told him I was sorry that happened to him. And he had, and I was going to call for some help for him. I said, I want the nurse to look at that, and then she may call other people because, that's not right. And so that started the whole process. In our building, our process was, if you suspect child abuse or neglect, that you notify the office, and the office would send down either the guidance counselor, the principal, or the nurse, whoever was in the building and available, and they would handle it from there. And they did. And so this woman was eventually prosecuted and convicted. Anyway, long story there, but I wanted you to know this happens in people's classrooms and you have to be aware. Okay. So here's a couple of things to know and look out for. Okay. Physical abuse is the non-accidental, on-purpose injury of somebody, kicking, burning, biting, any action that results in the child being hurt. Neglect, on the other hand, much harder to prove because, people are depriving children of food, clothing, shelter, medical care, or supervision, but this one's a lot more difficult to prove. Emotional abuse is, and that's also very difficult because you're talking about children that maybe show signs of depression or anxiety or withdrawal or very aggressive behavior. Very hard to prove. And sexual abuse includes, it's the obvious, allowing the child to engage in prostitution, production of pornography, and of course, being sexually exploited. So who is affected by abuse? Children from all communities. There's no limit to it. All races, all ethnicities, all socioeconomic backgrounds. However, it is found in greater numbers in homes where there's drug abuse, alcohol abuse. There could be teen pregnancy, where there's already violence in the home, where there are chronic health problems in the home, where the parents have experienced academic failure, and where there are family members that are incarcerated. That's just, studies have shown that. This is some data for children in Oklahoma. Not very happy to look at. More data, something for you to look at on your own. More data. Okay, so when to consider the possibility of physical abuse? Well, when the child comes to the classroom and has unexplained burns, bites, bruises, broken bones, or black eyes. And you're going to say, all kids come to the classroom with that at some point. And you're right, they do. But most kids have a really good explanation. Like the first thing they want to tell you when they walk in with their broken arm is, wow, teacher, you should have seen me fall off that bike. And then they had to take me to the hospital, and then blah, blah, you know, there's a big story that goes with it, and they want lots of sympathy and stickers, and here are the stickers I got from the nurse, and blah, blah, blah. Anyhow, you know, that's a decent explanation. But there are times when you can't put the injury with what they're telling you. You know, if you have a kid that comes in with 2 black eyes and they say, I walked into a door. There's just something about that just doesn't sound good to me. If you see a child like this that has a handprint injury, this is a classic sign of abuse, because this is an adult hand that hit this kid so hard, they left a bruise. When you see sock-like burns, if you're working with infants and toddlers and you see what really is from, I'd say, the lower leg, ankle down, as a burn, looks like a red sock. That's classic. What they'll tell you is that Junior was stepping into the bathtub and, you know, didn't get out fast enough. The water was too hot. Okay, let me tell you, there's no kid alive that's going to stand in a bathtub of boiling water long enough to boil their skin off. Just not going to happen, okay? And the same thing with the glove burns, and you'll see this. And you'll notice this kid's glove burns, they look right here where gloves would end. Again, hands were held in very, very hot water. There's not a kid alive that's going to do that on purpose long enough to get that kind of injury. Yes, kids put their hands in whatever they're not supposed to, but you know, one finger in some very, very hot water is going to cause them to go, whoa. And yeah, they're not going to hold, oh, let me hold both hands in there for about 5 minutes and see what happens. That makes no sense. If it doesn't pass the makes sense test, report it. Cigarette burns, they're a little harder to spot, because you're going to have kids that look kind of like this that have chigger bites in the summertime, or, you know, end of the summer, August, when they come back to school. So it's going to take a little bit more than just that to determine that's a cigarette burn. But if you see them up and down the arms, or perhaps on the torso as well, and that's something I would report. You know, I'd rather report something and it turned out to be nothing than not report something that was serious. Okay, this is kind of like what my little guy had. You see these, what look like loops? That's from a cord, a looped cord, and doing one of these, just like that. So that's what happens. And he had that up and down his back. Okay. Also, when you have kids that have been gone for a while, say they haven't been there in a week and they come back and they are covered with bruises that are healing, they're much better looking. That always makes me suspicious of why they were held out of school for a week. If you have a child that seems frightened of one of their caretakers when they're coming to pick them up, that's just a little suspicious to me, because most kids are real happy to go home. Now, there's a difference here. Sometimes you have a child, if you're teaching pre-K, and say they're one of those kids that has to finish whatever they're working on. Say they're building a tower and mom comes in and they're just like, I have to finish my tower. That's different. That's a purposeful boo-hoo about their tower. But if you see them a little shrinking back from that family member that's trying to take them home, that's not a good sign either. And even some children, you walk up behind them and you go, oh, great job. Well, as you're doing this, they're jumping into the next corner because you touched them. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean they've been abused, but oftentimes children that have been abused shrink back and they're scared when an adult tries to touch them in any way. And the last one, reports injury by caretaker. I'm telling you, that's probably the least likely thing to happen. Most children love their caretaker. They love their mom or stepmom or auntie or grandma or whoever's taking care of them. And they're real hesitant to report an injury, trust me. Also, sometimes people offer, really conflicting, unconvincing stories about how a child got hurt. It's the old 2 black eyes and a bruised nose. He walked into a door. Really? I mean, I've seen people walk into doors and it doesn't cause all that. If they constantly talk about the kid being evil and bad, that's not a good sign either. Harsh physical discipline. I don't know how you guys feel about spanking. It's your business. But I'm talking spanking and physical abuse are 2 different things. Bear that in mind. And unbelievable to me, because I always assumed if you had been abused as a child, you would be much less likely to ever abuse another person or a child. But it seems that's not true. If you've been abused as a child, you have a higher likelihood of doing it as an adult. Oh, here's the clothing business. I'm telling you, if you're out there on the playground and you know how hot it gets in Oklahoma. Say, for instance, they come in, they're wearing a long sleeve jacket. And they tell you, I've got to leave this on all day. Well, then say you're out there for the lunchtime recess and it's 90 degrees at that point. And I mean, Junior's standing in front of me, sweat is dripping off his face, but he's got his jacket on. At that point, I'm going to say, Junior, I'm telling you right now, I want that jacket off. That's just me, because I have a sneaking suspicion that there's something under that jacket that Junior's caretaker is trying to hide. Possibility of emotional abuse. This is a lot more difficult to find out about. Extremes in behavior. If you have a child that's either on one end, all constantly demanding and aggressive, or overly compliant, everything is totally passive, that also can come with emotional abuse. Inappropriately adult or infantile. Well, here's the other thing on that. If you have a child that all of a sudden becomes very infantile and regresses in their development, that's oftentimes a sign of child abuse. Delayed physical or emotional development. If their developmental stage of development suddenly regresses, it raises a suspicion. It just all works together. when the caretaker blames, belittles, berates the child, to me, that's such a negative sign. Unconcerned about the child, refuses to consider offers of help. If you have a child that's already got kind of difficulties adjusting in the classroom and other children, and they are totally unconcerned and do not want to provide any assistance as far as sign papers for the child to be tested or have counseling or things like that, that always makes me real suspicious, because I always think, what are they afraid the child's going to reveal? Overtly rejects the child, consistently dirty, severe body odor, obviously those are signs of neglect. Frequent absences from school, begs or steals food or money, that's definitely a sign of neglect. Children that have rotting teeth, or obviously can't see, they're squinting and everything, and you've sent home a million little things for them to get the child tested, or social services is trying to get them to get the child tested and nothing happens, that's a sign of neglect. Lacks sufficient clothing for the winter. A lot of this is socioeconomic related, and not necessarily purposeful neglect if you can't afford it. Our school always had a clothes closet for those of us who had children, and as children grow, my kids never outwore a winter coat. They outgrew the winter coat. So after their year of wear, the coat was still fine. I'd wash it and then take it and hang it in our clothes closet, because it would be fine for another kid to wear for a year. And because I had to replace it. Mine grew constantly. So I would suggest a clothes closet in that case, because kids get cold. States that there's no one at home to provide care. A lot of my first graders walked home to an empty house. They had a rope around their neck with the key. That's just the truth of it. They were 6. Is that neglect? I don't know. It could be necessity. People have to eat. So I'm just saying, no one at home. Appears indifferent, apathetic. If parents are suffering from depression, there's a higher incidence of child neglect. Irrational, bizarre behavior, child drug abuse, alcohol abuse. So sexual abuse, if you have a child that seems unusually sophisticated in everything they know, then I am definitely going to report that. Say, for instance, you have a child that you're teaching pre-K and they're in the home center, and they're conducting an act with the dolls that they should really never have a knowledge of at that point. I would document everything I saw and heard, and then I would report it immediately. If you're working with, say, kindergarten first graders, and they're writing in their journals and they're drawing something, body parts that they really shouldn't be knowing about, especially if it's of the opposite gender, and things like that, photograph of whatever it is and report. If you're teaching end of first grade, second and third grade, and they're writing in their journal about something that happened to them, again, photograph of the writings and report. And sometimes you hear them talking to other children about stuff like that. I would definitely document that and report it. If the child has difficulty walking or sitting, every now and then you'll see a kid that's doing one of these scoot, 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 scoot all day on their chair. Well, that could be a couple of things. One symptom that's a symptom of worms. Okay, they may have pinworms, makes them real itchy, hard trouble sitting still. Okay, that's also a symptom of venereal disease. If that has been the case, they may have been abused at some point. So report it to the school nurse, let the school nurse investigate the origin of the discomfort. You don't want to do that in the classroom, and let the school nurse take it from there. If you have a child that's reporting strange nightmares or sudden bedwetting episodes, that could also have a lot to do with what's happening at nighttime at home. If there are sudden changes in appetite, if the child suddenly refuses to change clothes or participate in physical activities, that could be another symptom. And I would, I'd also throw out here, sometimes children do talk about it. You hear them talk about it a little bit in their conversations. They'll throw things out that they really shouldn't know about. And the other thing is, you may have a child that comes to your classroom that's been pretty, been just the normal average kid. And then from one day to the next, that child comes in your classroom and falls asleep every day. And well, one of the things that could happen at that point is that child could be homeless and living at the homeless shelter. And because they keep the lights on all night, then the child would be awake most of the night too. Or that child is purposely keeping themselves up at night because bad things happen when you go to sleep. Okay, so now that I've depressed everybody, here is the statewide hotline. You are a mandated reporter if you have any suspicion at all. Follow the policy of the school in which you work. You need to learn that before the first child arrives in your classroom, and then follow that policy. If you do not have a policy, call the statewide hotline. They will need your name, your address, your phone number. You will never be identified, okay? You cannot be sued. Even if there's no basis for it, if they investigate and they say, no, it was nothing. Well, that's great. I'm glad it was nothing, but you did your job. You are a mandated reporter. Always remember that. All right. End of lecture. Bye-bye.